They thought they could destroy me in front of everyone. They thought they could steal years of my blood and sweat and claim it as their victory. But what they didn't know was that I held something that could bring this entire company to its knees. And when the evidence appeared in that boardroom, every eye would turn to them not in celebration, but to witness the most devastating fall of their career. The silence before the storm was about to break, and I was the one holding the thunder. My name is Amanda Brooks, and until 3 minutes ago, I thought respect was something I'd earned after 12 years at Brightcore Systems. But as I sat in that glass-walled conference room on the 42nd floor, watching Ethan Cole's lips curl into that patronizing smirk, I realized how wrong I'd been. "The thing about your proposal, Amanda," he said, leaning back in his Italian leather chair like he owned the world, "is that anyone could have come up with it. It's basic, elementary, really." The words hung in the air like poison gas. 23 pairs of eyes turned to me, board members, department heads, even my own team members who'd worked alongside me for years. Not one of them spoke up. Not one of them mentioned the countless late nights, the breakthrough at 3:45 a.m. that had cracked the algorithm, or the 6 months of meticulous planning that had gone into what he'd just dismissed as elementary. I felt my jaw clench, my fingers digging into the leather portfolio in my lap. The morning sun streaming through the floor-to-ceiling windows suddenly felt cold on my skin. This wasn't just criticism. This was calculated humiliation. Ethan had been with the company for exactly 8 weeks, brought in as the new VP of Innovation with his Harvard MBA and his Silicon Valley connections. 8 weeks, and he'd decided that destroying me publicly was his way of establishing dominance. "Perhaps," he continued, his voice dripping with false concern, "you should focus on execution rather than ideation. Some people are better suited for support roles." Support roles. After I'd led the team that landed our biggest client, after my strategies had generated over $200 million in revenue, after I'd turned down 3 headhunting offers because I believed in this company. The silence in the room was suffocating. I could hear the hum of the air conditioning, the distant sound of traffic 42 floors below, someone's nervous pen clicking. My assistant, Marcus, shifted uncomfortably in his seat. Jennifer from accounting wouldn't meet my eyes. Even Tom, who'd been my mentor since my first day, suddenly found his phone screen fascinating. I stood up slowly, deliberately, every movement measured, controlled. I wouldn't give him the satisfaction of seeing me break. "I see," I said, my voice steady as granite. "Thank you for the feedback." I gathered my laptop, my notes, the presentation I'd spent 3 weeks perfecting, the presentation that contained the seed of an idea that would revolutionize our entire platform, the one I'd been naive enough to share in detail during last month's strategy session. The chair scraped against the floor as I pushed it back, the sound sharp and final in the oppressive quiet. I walked to the door, my heels clicking against the polished marble floor with metronomic precision. 23 pairs of eyes followed me, but not one voice called me back. As my hand touched the cold chrome door handle, Ethan delivered his final blow. "Oh, and Amanda, I'll be taking point on the Morrison Industries pitch. I've already reworked your basic ideas into something more substantial." The Morrison Industries pitch, my pitch, the one I'd cultivated through 6 months of relationship building, countless coffee meetings, and careful negotiations. The deal that would define careers. I turned the handle and walked out, letting the door close with a soft whisper behind me. But as I stood in that hallway, looking at my reflection in the polished elevator doors, professional blazer, company ID badge, the face of someone who'd given everything, I made a decision. They wanted to play games fine, but they'd forgotten one crucial detail. I'd built the infrastructure they were standing on, and I knew exactly where every weak point was hidden. The text message arrived while I was still in the elevator, my phone buzzing against the silk lining of my blazer pocket. "Sarah from IT. Amanda, I'm so sorry. They just removed your name from the Morrison project files. All credit now goes to EC. EC. Ethan Cole." Even his initials tasted bitter in my mind. I stepped out into the parking garage, the fluorescent lights casting harsh shadows across the concrete. My hands weren't shaking anymore. They were steady, purposeful. As I unlocked my car and sat in the driver's seat, I didn't start the engine. Instead, I opened my laptop right there in the dim parking garage and logged into our project management system. There it was, the Morrison Industries Strategic Proposal, created by Amanda Brooks, January 15th, last modified by Ethan Cole, today at 9:22 a.m. He'd changed exactly 3 words in the executive summary and added his name as primary author. 3 words. That's all it took to steal 6 months of my life. But what Ethan didn't know, what none of them knew, was that I'd learned long ago to protect myself. Every original draft, every brainstorming session, every email chain where I'd developed the concepts that would win that contract, I had them all, time-stamped, digitally signed, backed up in 3 different locations that IT didn't even know about. I scrolled through the project history, watching my work disappear piece by piece. The predictive analytics model I developed during Christmas break while everyone else was on vacation now attributed to Ethan. The client relationship map I'd painstakingly built through LinkedIn research and industry conferences, Ethan's innovation. The competitive analysis that had required me to learn an entirely new programming language, Ethan's strategic insight. My phone rang. Marcus. Amanda. What the hell just happened in there? Everyone knows that was your... Everyone knows, I interrupted, and everyone stayed silent. The pause on the other end told me everything. Marcus was a good person, but he had a mortgage, 2 kids in college. He couldn't afford to be a hero. None of them could. He's presenting it to Morrison Industries next Thursday, Marcus whispered. The full board will be there. Henderson from the Wall Street Journal is covering it. It's going to be huge. Next Thursday? I had 10 days. Marcus, I need you to do something for me. Don't respond. Just listen. Check your personal email in an hour. I hung up before he could protest. Then I began my real work. Every email I'd sent about the Morrison project forwarded to my personal account. Every revision history showing Ethan had never contributed a single original thought screenshotted and saved. The original project brief I'd written at 11:30 p.m. on a Sunday night while Ethan was probably at some rooftop bar in Manhattan, downloaded and verified. But the crown jewel was something even more precious. 3 months ago, I'd recorded the strategy session where I'd first pitched the Morrison approach. Company policy allowed recording for note-taking purposes. In that recording, clear as day, was Ethan saying, "I don't understand the appeal. Morrison Industries is too traditional for this kind of innovation. It's a waste of resources." Then, 43 minutes later, after I'd explained the methodology in detail, "Brilliant work, Amanda. This is exactly the kind of thinking we need." I saved that file with particular care. By the time I finally started my car, the sun was setting, painting the city skyline in shades of amber and gold. My phone had 17 missed calls from various colleagues. The news was spreading. Amanda Brooks, the woman who'd built half the company's profitable strategies, had been publicly humiliated and was having her work stolen. But as I drove home through the evening traffic, I wasn't thinking about humiliation. I was thinking about that boardroom next Thursday, about the moment when Ethan would stand at that podium, confident in his theft, ready to claim his victory. He had no idea what was coming. The proposal he'd stolen was just the visible part of the iceberg. The real innovation, the part that would make Morrison Industries sign on the dotted line, was still locked in my head, and without it, his presentation would crash and burn in the most spectacular way possible. I pulled into my driveway as the last rays of sunlight disappeared behind the horizon. 10 days to prepare. 10 days to ensure that when the truth came out, it wouldn't whisper. It would roar. Monday morning, 7:45 a.m. I walked into Brightcore Systems for what would be my last week, carrying my usual coffee and wearing my sharpest suit. The security guard, Robert, gave me his usual warm smile, unaware that everything had changed. "Morning, Ms. Brooks, early as always." "Morning, Robert. Beautiful day, isn't it?" It was, and it was about to get better. I'd spent the weekend making my decision. The resignation letter was already drafted, sitting in my outbox, scheduled to send Friday at 5 p.m., but first, I had work to do. Careful, meticulous work that required me to be inside the building, inside the system, with full access to everything I'd built over the past 12 years. The office was nearly empty at this hour. Perfect. I sat at my desk, logged in, and began the process of documenting everything. Not stealing, I wasn't Ethan. I was simply ensuring that my intellectual property, my innovations, my contributions were properly attributed and preserved. The employee handbook was clear: any work created independently, outside of assigned projects, remained the intellectual property of the creator, and I'd been very careful over the years to develop my best ideas on my own time, on my personal laptop, before bringing them to the company, the Morrison strategy. Born at 2 a.m. in my home office, refined over weekends, documented in my personal journals long before I'd ever presented it at Brightcore. I pulled up the internal project management system. As team lead, I still had administrative access to the historical data. Ethan might have changed the author fields on the current documents, but he couldn't touch the audit logs. Every keystroke, every save, every modification was recorded in the system's deep architecture. It never deleted these logs, company policy for legal compliance. One by one, I exported them. The timestamp showing I'd created the original Morrison pitch document. The version history showing Ethan's only contributions were formatting changes. The access logs proving he'd never even opened the strategic analysis files until after he'd claimed authorship. "You're here early." I didn't flinch. I'd heard Jennifer approaching her heels had a distinctive click pattern. "Just wrapping up some documentation," I said, not looking up from my screen. She lingered by my desk, clearly wanting to say something. "Finally, Amanda, about Friday's meeting." "It was illuminating," I said, my fingers never stopping their work on the keyboard. "I learned a lot about how things really work around here." She shifted uncomfortably. "Ethan's new. He doesn't understand the history, what you've contributed." "Oh, I think he understands perfectly." I finally looked up, meeting her eyes with a steady gaze. He knew exactly whose work would be most valuable to steal. Jennifer's face flushed. She'd been in that room. She'd stayed silent. "Amanda, You have nothing to apologize for," I said, and I meant it. "We all do what we have to do to survive. I understand that now." She left quickly after that, probably to report the conversation to Ethan. Good. Let him think I was bitter but beaten. Let him believe I was just another corporate casualty, too demoralized to fight back. By lunch, I'd secured everything I needed, but there was one more crucial step. I made my way to the archives in the basement physical storage that most people forgot existed. Old project binders, printed proposals from the pre-digital era, and most importantly, the original incorporation documents for several of our key innovations. Hidden among the dusty folders was a treasure trove: my original notebooks from my first years at the company. Handwritten ideas, sketches, algorithms, all dated and witnessed by Tom back when he actually had integrity, including the primitive version of what would become the Morrison strategy, conceived 7 years ago when Ethan was probably still in business school. I photographed every page. At 3 p.m., I submitted my transition documentation: thorough, professional, complete, everything the company would need after my departure, everything except the crucial insight that would make the Morrison pitch actually work. That stayed with me. Tom finally approached me at 4:30, when the office was buzzing with end-of-day energy. "Amanda, can we talk?" I looked at my mentor, the man who'd guided my career for over a decade, who'd sat silent while Ethan destroyed me. "There's nothing to talk about, Tom." "I know you're angry." "Angry." I laughed, surprising us both with how genuine it sounded. "No, Tom, I'm not angry. I'm free. For the first time in 12 years. I see everything clearly." He looked older suddenly, tired. "Ethan has connections. The board loves him. Fighting him would be—" "Who said anything about fighting?" I smiled, saving my final file, backing up my final document. "I'm just leaving, pursuing other opportunities. Isn't that what professionals do?" Tom studied my face, looking for something: rage, desperation, plans for revenge. But all he saw was calm. The dangerous kind of calm that comes when someone has already won the game while everyone else is still learning the rules. "Your resignation," he asked quietly. "End of week. Don't worry. I'll make sure everything is properly transitioned." As Tom walked away, I allowed myself one small smile. Everything was in place. The evidence was secured. The trap was set. And Ethan Cole was about to learn why you should never steal from someone who knows exactly where all the bodies are buried. Tuesday evening. My resignation had been submitted. Effective Friday, the office gossip mill was in overdrive, but I was already 3 moves ahead, sitting in a downtown coffee shop with someone who could change everything. Amanda Brooks. David Reeves extended his hand across the small table. I've been hoping to meet you for years. David was senior vice president at Morrison Industries, the very company Ethan planned to pitch to in 2 days. We'd exchanged emails over the months, building the relationship that Ethan was now trying to hijack. But David had reached out to my personal email yesterday, confused by the sudden change in project leadership. I have to admit, David said, stirring his coffee. When Ethan Cole contacted us saying he'd be leading the presentation, we were surprised. You've been our point person for 6 months. Corporate restructuring, I said smoothly. You know how it is. David's eyes narrowed slightly. He'd been in business for 30 years. He could smell corporate politics like blood in the water. Interesting timing, he said, especially since the preliminary proposal we received last week seems to be missing something. The integration framework you described in our last call, it's not in the documentation. Of course it wasn't, because that framework existed only in my personal notes, never shared with Brightcore's internal systems. It was the keystone that would make the entire strategy work, and without it, Ethan's presentation would be nothing but pretty slides and empty promises. I'm sure Mr. Cole will address all your concerns on Thursday, I said, taking a sip of my coffee. Will you be attending? Unfortunately, no. I'll be pursuing other opportunities by then. David set down his cup carefully. Other opportunities. I'm considering starting my own consulting firm, Strategic Innovation for Enterprise Clients. I pulled out a folder, not a Brightcore folder, but my own. In fact, I've been developing some independent ideas that might interest Morrison Industries, completely separate from anything connected to my current employer, of course. I showed him 3 pages, my original framework, dated 2 years ago, notarized and legally protected as my personal intellectual property, the same framework that would make Brightcore's proposal work, but that Ethan didn't even know existed. David studied the documents, his expression shifting from interest to understanding. This is the missing piece. It's my piece, I corrected. Developed on my own time, with my own resources, I'm happy to license it to whoever ends up being Morrison Industries' partner, for the right terms, of course. And if Brightcore wants to use it in their presentation, they'd need my permission, which they haven't asked for, probably because they don't know they need it. David leaned back, a slow smile spreading across his face. You know, Amanda, Morrison Industries values innovation, but we value integrity more. If Brightcore is having internal issues with attribution and ownership, I couldn't possibly comment on internal matters, I said, but I can tell you that if you have any concerns about the Thursday presentation, you might want to ask very specific questions about who actually developed each component of the strategy, and when, and whether they can prove it. I pulled out another document. This is particularly interesting, a timestamp certificate from the U.S. Patent Office for a provisional filing. The core algorithm that Brightcore will probably present as their innovation, I filed for protection 6 months ago. Personal filing, not corporate. David whistled low. They're about to present your IP as their own. I'm sure it's just an oversight, but you might want your legal team present on Thursday, just to ask the right questions. We talked for another hour, by the time we shook hands goodbye. David had my personal contact information, copies of my provisional patents, and a very clear understanding of what was about to happen in that boardroom. That night, I called Michael Harrison, the Wall Street Journal reporter who was planning to cover Thursday's presentation. Ms. Brooks, I was hoping to interview you about the Morrison deal. Ethan Cole mentioned you'd been instrumental in the early stages. How generous of him, I said. Actually, Michael, I have a better story for you. Are you familiar with the concept of corporate IP theft? The pause was brief. I'm listening. Thursday's presentation might be more interesting than you think. You'll want to pay attention when someone asks about attribution and ownership, and you might want to have your recorder running when they do. Are you saying... I'm saying that sometimes the most interesting stories happen when someone thinks they've already won. Bring your photographer too. The facial expressions should be memorable. After I hung up, I sat in my home office, looking at the city lights through my window. Everything was in motion now. The evidence was distributed, the players were positioned, and the stage was set. Ethan thought he'd stolen my crown, but he'd only grabbed a replica, never realizing the real jewels were still in my possession. Thursday's presentation would be his coronation. All right. His coronation as the king of fools. My phone buzzed. Sarah from IT. Amanda, Ethan just asked me to revoke your system access early. He seems nervous about something. I smiled, typing back, too late for that to matter now. Indeed it was. The game was already over. Ethan just didn't know it yet. Thursday morning, 9 a.m. The 42nd floor boardroom of Brightcore Systems had been transformed into a presentation theater. The mahogany table gleamed under the crystal chandeliers. 40 leather chairs arranged in perfect rows. The 100-inch display screen showing the Morrison Industries logo alongside Brightcore's. I sat in the back row, having arrived through the visitor's entrance with a guest pass that David Reeves had arranged. My presence hadn't been noticed yet. Everyone was focused on the front where Ethan was making last-minute adjustments to his laptop, his team of assistants buzzing around him like anxious bees. The room filled quickly. Morrison Industries had sent their full acquisition team, 12 executives including David, who caught my eye and nodded almost imperceptibly. The Brightcore board of directors occupied the front row. Our CEO, William Foster, checking his phone obsessively. Michael Harrison from the Wall Street Journal sat to my left, his photographer already snapping candids. 3 other reporters had shown up, tipped off by Michael that something significant might happen. Tom walked in and froze when he saw me. I gave him a small smile and gestured to the empty seat beside me. He shook his head and found a place near the front, but I could see his hands trembling as he opened his portfolio. At 9:15 a.m. sharp, Ethan stepped to the podium. He looked every inch the Silicon Valley executive tailored navy suit, perfect hair, confidence radiating from every pore. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the future of strategic innovation. The lights dimmed. His first slide illuminated the screen my work, my design, my vision, with his name in bold letters at the bottom. Over the past 8 weeks, he began, the lie rolling smoothly off his tongue, I've developed a revolutionary approach to enterprise integration that will transform how Morrison Industries operates in the digital space. 8 weeks, I made a note in my journal. The scratching of my pen audible in the hushed room. Michael glanced over, saw what I'd written, and made his own note. Ethan continued, walking through my analysis, my market research, my competitive framework. He was a good presenter. I had to give him that. Confident, charismatic, engaging. The Morrison executives were leaning forward, clearly impressed. The Brightcore board was beaming with pride at their new VP of Innovation. Slide after slide of my work filled the screen. The predictive model I'd built, the customer journey maps I'd designed, the integration architecture I'd sketched on napkins during countless coffee meetings with David's team. The cornerstone of this strategy, Ethan announced, clicking to a complex diagram, is our proprietary algorithmic framework that will seamlessly connect Morrison's legacy systems with next-generation platforms. That's when David Reeves raised his hand. Excuse me, Mr. Cole, could you elaborate on this algorithmic framework? It seems to be the critical component, but I don't see the technical specifications. Ethan's smile flickered for just a moment. Of course. The framework utilizes advanced machine learning protocols to create adaptive bridges between disparate systems. I see. David pulled out my folder, the one I'd shown him 2 days ago. And you developed this framework yourself? With my team, yes. In 8 weeks. We work efficiently. David nodded slowly. Impressive. And you can provide documentation of the development process, code repositories, version histories. The room had gone very still. William Foster was no longer looking at his phone. The reporters were all leaning forward. I saw Sarah from IT slip in through the side door, eyes wide. All of that is proprietary to Brightcore, Ethan said, his voice still steady but his hand gripping the podium tighter. Naturally, David agreed. But surely you can show us the patent filing for something this revolutionary. You must have filed for protection. We're in the process. Because, David continued, pulling out a document. We found a provisional patent filing for an almost identical framework, filed 6 months ago, by Amanda Brooks. The silence was absolute. Every head in the room turned to look at me. I stood up slowly, smoothing my skirt. Good morning, everyone. Ethan's face had gone from tan to pale to an interesting shade of gray. Amanda, you're not supposed to be here. Oh, I'm not here as a Brightcore employee, I said, walking toward the front of the room. I'm here as the owner of the intellectual property you're trying to sell. William Foster stood up. What the hell is going on here? An excellent question, David Reeves said. Mr. Cole has just spent 20 minutes presenting work that, according to our research, was created entirely by Ms. Brooks, work that she owns independently, work that Brightcore apparently doesn't have the rights to use. The photographer's camera clicked rapidly, capturing Ethan's expression as his carefully constructed world began to crumble. Michael Harrison was typing furiously on his tablet, probably live tweeting the drama. This is ridiculous, Ethan sputtered. I've led this project for 8 weeks, I interrupted, pulling out my laptop. May I? David gestured to the screen controls. I connected my laptop and pulled up a file. This is the original Morrison Industries strategic proposal, created January 15th, by me. Here's the metadata. Here's the version history. Here's the email I sent to myself that night at 11:47 p.m., documenting my ideas. And here, I clicked to the next screen, is Mr. Cole's first contribution to the project, a formatting change, made 3 days ago. The board members were on their feet now. William Foster's face was purple with rage, but I couldn't tell if it was directed at Ethan or me. But the real issue, I continued, my voice carrying clearly through the chaos, is that the framework making this entire strategy viable, the one Mr. Cole can't explain because he doesn't understand it, belongs to me, not to Brightcore, to me personally. I turned to face the room fully, making eye contact with as many people as possible. So Morrison Industries has a choice. You can try to work with someone who stole ideas he doesn't understand, or you can work with the person who actually created them. The room erupted. The chaos in the boardroom was beautiful. William Foster was shouting at Ethan. Board members were demanding explanations. The Morrison Industries legal team was huddled in intense discussion. Michael Harrison had moved to the front, his recorder held high to catch every word. The photographer's camera never stopped clicking. But I wasn't done. If I may, I said, my voice cutting through the noise. There's more. The room gradually quieted, all eyes returning to me. Ethan had collapsed into a chair, his face the color of ash, his perfect composure shattered. Mr. Cole stated he's been working on this for 8 weeks, but I have something interesting to share. I clicked to a new file and audio recording. This is from our strategy meeting on February 10th. Company policy allows recording for note-taking purposes. I pressed play. Ethan's voice filled the room, clear and dismissive. I don't understand the appeal. Morrison Industries is too traditional for this kind of innovation. It's a waste of resources. Then my voice, explaining the methodology, the vision, the potential. 43 minutes of me building the entire framework while Ethan argued against it. Then, at the end, Ethan again. Brilliant work, Amanda. This is exactly the kind of thinking we need. I stopped the recording. Mr. Cole went from calling it a waste of resources to claiming it as his own innovation. Quite the transformation. David Reeves stood up. Ms. Brooks, do you have documentation of your independent development of this framework? Everything, I confirmed, pulling up file after file. Notarized notebooks from 7 years ago showing the initial concept, development logs from my personal computer, code repositories with timestamps, email chains with my personal attorney establishing ownership, and of course, the provisional patent filing. William Foster finally found his voice. Ethan, is this true? Ethan opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. I refined the ideas. I made them presentable. You changed 3 words, I said flatly, and added your name. This is entrapment, Ethan suddenly burst out, jumping to his feet. She set me up. She deliberately left out crucial information to make me fail. I resigned, I said calmly. Effective tomorrow. I took my intellectual property with me, as is my legal right. You chose to present work you didn't understand and couldn't legally use. That's not entrapment. That's theft. Tom finally spoke up from his seat. Amanda, if you had concerns, you should have raised them internally. Like the concerns I raised in the meeting last Friday, I turned to face him directly. When Mr. Cole publicly humiliated me and called my work elementary, when every single person in leadership sat silent and let it happen, those concerns. Tom's mouth snapped shut. David Reeves cleared his throat. Mr. Foster, Morrison Industries needs to reassess this situation. We came here expecting a presentation from Brightcore's best strategic mind. It appears that person is no longer with your company. Now wait a minute, William started. Furthermore, David continued, we have serious concerns about partnering with an organization that would attempt to present stolen intellectual property as their own. The legal ramifications alone. We can resolve this, William said desperately. Amanda, surely we can come to an arrangement. My resignation is effective tomorrow, I repeated. My intellectual property comes with me. If Morrison Industries wants to use my framework, they can contract with me directly, as an independent consultant. Michael Harrison raised his hand. Ms. Brooks, are you saying you're starting your own firm? Brooks Strategic Innovation, I confirmed. We'll be specializing in enterprise transformation strategies. Morrison Industries will be our first client, assuming we can come to terms. David smiled. I think we can definitely come to terms. This is outrageous, Ethan exploded. She can't just. Mr. Cole, David interrupted, his voice ice cold. You just spent 20 minutes trying to sell us property you don't own. You're fortunate, Ms. Brooks isn't pressing criminal charges for intellectual property theft. I pulled up one final document. Actually, about that, this is a cease and desist letter from my attorney. Brightcore and Mr. Cole are prohibited from using any of my proprietary frameworks, algorithms, or strategic materials. It was delivered to your legal department this morning at 8 a.m. William pulled out his phone, presumably seeing the urgent messages he'd been ignoring. His face went from purple to white. You planned this, Ethan said, his voice barely above a whisper. You planned everything. No, I corrected. You planned to steal my work. I simply ensured there would be consequences. The Morrison Industries team was already packing up. David approached me with an extended hand. Ms. Brooks, shall we schedule a meeting to discuss terms tomorrow afternoon? Perhaps? That would be perfect, I said, shaking his hand firmly. As the Morrison executives filed out, several Brightcore board members surrounded William and Ethan, their voices low and furious. The reporters were already rushing toward the exits, eager to file their stories. Tomorrow's Wall Street Journal would be interesting reading. But none of that mattered anymore. I'd taken back what was mine, my work, my reputation, my future. And Ethan Cole. He was about to learn that in the corporate world, when you steal from the architect, you shouldn't be surprised when the whole building comes crashing down. The boardroom had become a war zone. William Foster's voice cracked as he screamed at Ethan. Do you have any idea what you've done? Any idea at all? Ethan stood frozen at the podium, his hands gripping the edges like a drowning man clutching driftwood. The perfect executive facade had crumbled entirely, leaving behind a hollow-eyed man watching his career disintegrate in real time. Mr. Foster, board member Patricia Hernandez interrupted, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. We need an immediate emergency session. This is a catastrophic breach of corporate ethics. It's worse than that, added James Morrison, Morrison Industries' chief legal counsel, who had remained behind while the others left. If Ms. Brooks's claims are substantiated, and from what I've seen, Brightcore could be facing fraud charges. We were about to sign a $200 million contract based on stolen intellectual property. She set me up, Ethan suddenly erupted, spinning to face me with wild eyes. This was calculated. She deliberately withheld critical information to sabotage the presentation. Mr. Cole, I said, my voice steady as granite. I documented every single piece of my work. I protected my intellectual property as any smart innovator would. You had 8 weeks to develop your own ideas. Instead, you chose to steal mine. But you knew I couldn't make it work without my framework, I finished. The framework you didn't even know existed because you never bothered to understand the work you were stealing that framework. Michael Harrison stepped forward, his recorder still running. Mr. Cole, are you admitting that you knowingly presented Ms. Brooks' work as your own? Ethan's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. His lawyer, who had been hastily summoned, grabbed his arm. Don't answer that. But the damage was done. Every word, every admission, every desperate excuse had been captured by multiple recording devices. The Wall Street Journal photographer was still shooting, documenting Ethan's complete unraveling. William Foster turned to me, his face a mixture of rage and desperation. Amanda, please, we can work this out. Name your terms. We'll match any offer Morrison makes. Hell, we'll double it. It's not about money, I said, gathering my laptop and documents. It's about integrity. Something this company lost when it chose to protect a thief instead of the person who actually built its success. You're going to destroy us, Tom said quietly from his corner. 12 years. Amanda, doesn't that mean anything? I paused at that, turning to face my former mentor. It meant everything, until last Friday at 11:15 a.m., when you sat silent while my work was dismissed as elementary. That's when those 12 years ended. Tom, board member Richard Blackstone, who had been frantically typing on his phone, looked up with a pale face. It's already out. Bloomberg just picked up Harrison's tweet thread. Our stock is dropping. How bad? William asked. 7% in the last 5 minutes. The room erupted again, board members shouting at William, William shouting at Ethan, Ethan's lawyer trying to escort him out while Patricia Hernandez blocked the door, demanding answers. Through it all, I stood calm in the eye of the storm. Everything was proceeding exactly as I'd anticipated. Enough! William's voice boomed across the room. Everyone froze. He turned to Ethan, his face twisted with fury. You're terminated. Effective immediately. Security will escort you out. You can't. I have a contract, which contains a morality clause and specific provisions about intellectual property theft, Patricia said coldly. Your contract is void. Mr. Cole? 2 security guards appeared at the door, Robert among them, looking deeply uncomfortable. Ethan looked around wildly, searching for allies, finding none. Even his own team had backed away, distancing themselves from the radioactive disaster he'd become. This isn't over, he snarled at me as security approached. I'll sue you for defamation, for sabotage, for... Mr. Cole, James Morrison interrupted. I'd be very careful about making threats. Ms. Brooks has enough evidence to bury you in civil and criminal litigation. If I were your lawyer, I'd be advising you to stay very, very quiet. Ethan's lawyer whispered urgently in his ear. Whatever he said made Ethan's remaining color drain away. Without another word, he let security escort him out, his footsteps echoing in the hallway until they faded to nothing. The boardroom fell silent except for the scratch of reporters' pens and the soft click of keyboards. William Foster straightened his tie, trying to salvage some dignity. The board will be conducting a full investigation. We'll need your cooperation, Amanda. My attorney will be in touch, I said simply. I walked to the door, then stopped, turning back one final time. The mighty boardroom of Brightcore Systems looked smaller somehow, diminished. The executives who'd ruled from this tower were revealed as the cowards they'd always been, willing to sacrifice loyalty for the appearance of innovation. You know what the real tragedy is, I said to the room. I would have given you everything, my ideas, my innovation, my future. All I asked for in return was respect. I looked directly at Tom. But you couldn't even give me that. As I reached the door, my phone buzzed. A message from David Reeves. Incredible performance. Morrison Industries would like to offer you a partnership. Not just a contract. Let's build something together. I smiled, stepping into the hallway where a small crowd had gathered employees who'd heard the commotion. Junior staff who'd always wondered why their ideas went uncredited. Others who'd been stepped on by those above them. They looked at me with something I hadn't seen in years' hope. Sarah from IT started clapping, then Marcus, then others. By the time I reached the elevator, the applause echoed through the entire floor. The elevator doors closed on the applause, sealing me in blessed silence. 42 floors down, each number counting away the years I'd given to this place. By the time I reached the lobby, my phone had exploded with messages, job offers, interview requests, LinkedIn notifications by the hundreds. But I didn't look at any of them, not yet. I walked through the lobby one last time, my heels clicking against the marble with a different rhythm, now not the hurried pace of an overworked employee, but the measured stride of someone who had already won. Robert, the security guard, was waiting by the door. "Ms. Brooks," he said quietly, "I just wanted to say what you did up there, that took guts, real guts." "Thank you, Robert." He held the door open for me, and I stepped out into the afternoon sunshine. The city looked different somehow, brighter, full of possibility instead of obligation. My phone rang. David Reeves. "Amanda, I know we said tomorrow, but the Morrison board is meeting in an hour. They want to fast-track our partnership. Can you make it?" I looked back at the Brightcore building one last time. Through the glass, I could see the lobby television displaying breaking news. Tech giant, Brightcore Systems in intellectual property scandal. "I'll be there in 20 minutes, I said. The text came while I was in the cab. From William Foster. "The board has reconsidered. We're prepared to offer you the VP of Innovation position, Ethan's office, triple your previous salary, complete autonomy. Please, Amanda." I deleted it without responding. Another text, this one from Tom. "I'm sorry, I was a coward. You deserved better." That one I kept, not out of forgiveness, but as a reminder that loyalty only flows upward in places like Brightcore, that mentor can become betrayer in the span of a single meeting, that the only person who would ever truly protect my work was me. The Morrison Industries building was everything Brightcore wasn't. When I walked in, David himself was waiting in the lobby, hand extended, smile genuine. "Ready to change the world?" he asked. "I already did," I said, "this morning at approximately 9:45 a.m. He laughed, leading me to the executive elevator. "The Wall Street Journal article is already online. Corporate theft exposed in real time. You're trending on Twitter." Good. As we rose to the Morrison boardroom smaller than Brightcore's, warmer somehow, David turned serious. "Amanda, I need you to know something. We didn't just want your framework. We wanted you. We've been watching your work for years, wondering when you'd realize you were worth more than they were paying you." The boardroom doors opened. 12 executives stood and applauded. Not the desperate applause of employees witnessing a revolution, but the respectful welcome of equals recognizing talent. Ms. Brooks, the CEO, Margaret Morrison herself, extended her hand. "We'd like to offer you more than a partnership. We want you to head our new innovation division, full equity stake, your name on the door, your rules." I shook her hand, firm and steady. "Let's discuss terms." 3 hours later, I walked out with a contract that valued my intellectual property at $50 million, a corner office with a view of the entire city, and most importantly, ironclad legal protection for every idea I would ever create. My phone had one last message, from Ethan Cole. "You've ruined my life." I typed back, "No, you ruined your life the moment you decided my work was yours to take. I just made sure everyone saw it happen." Then I blocked his number, deleted the thread, and stepped into my new future. The sun was setting as I stood on the observation deck of the Morrison building, looking out at the city. Somewhere in the Brightcore Tower, they were probably still doing damage control, still trying to explain to investors how they'd let a thief represent them, still calculating the cost of losing their best innovator. But that wasn't my problem anymore. I pulled out my phone and posted a single update on LinkedIn. "Excited to announce I'm joining Morrison Industries as Chief Innovation Officer. To everyone who's ever had their work stolen, their contributions minimized, their ideas claimed by others, document everything. Protect yourself, and never, ever let them convince you that your silence is professionalism." Within minutes, it had 1,000 likes. Within an hour, 10,000. My phone rang, an unknown number. "Ms. Brooks, this is Jennifer Walsh from 60 Minutes. We'd love to talk to you about your story." I smiled. watching the city lights begin to twinkle in the growing darkness. I'll have my people call your people. My people. I like the sound of that. As I stood there, I didn't think about revenge or vindication or even justice. I thought about tomorrow, about the innovations I would create, the team I would build, the culture I would foster, one where ideas were credited, contributions valued, and brilliance recognized regardless of who possessed it. Ethan Cole thought he'd stolen my future. Instead, he'd freed me to build a better one. The city stretched out before me, infinite with possibility, and for the first time in 12 years, I couldn't wait to see what Monday morning would bring. Thank you for listening to my story. I'd love to know where you're tuning in from. Drop a comment below and let's connect. If this story resonated with you, please subscribe to the channel and share your thoughts. Have you ever faced something similar in your workplace? How did you handle it? Your experiences matter, and I'd love to hear them. Until next time, remember, document everything, know your worth, and never let anyone steal your thunder.